Well, welcome to question 119 of the Secunda Secundae. The topic today is the prodigality, story of the prodigal person. I'm Dr. Thibault. The issue of being prodigal is one where it is sometimes seen as a deficiency in liberality or an excess in liberality based on where you're coming from, and we'll look at that. A person is wasteful in his or her money or possessions. As you remember from question 118 and 117 on liberality and on covetousness, we're really struggling with the issue of material belongings with money. There is a sense of general covetousness, a general prodigalness, but it really is about how it relates to money and material possessions. I think normally I don't do long sections from books other than the Summa, but I think because this section is so short, only 3 questions, I think you can't really do the issue of prodigal without the story of the prodigal son. And I think it's illuminates best. When you look to the catechism, the thing that comes up repeatedly is the story of the prodigal son. To cover all of the sections related to the prodigal son, then the catechism would be too much for any one lecture. That would be probably a 3-hour lecture if we wanted to really go through all of the places where the prodigal son is referred to within both catechisms, Baltimore and the modern catechism. So the story of the prodigal son. A man had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me," so that the father divided the property between them. After a few days, the younger son collected all his belongings and set off to a distant country, where he squandered his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck the country, and he found himself in dire need. This is prodigal wastefulness. He just wasted it. And it lacked prudence. He wasn't preparing for bad times which might come ahead. He was living for the moment, living for the now. So he didn't see it coming. So he's living imprudently, intemperately, and wastefully. That's the story. Younger son is truly under the definition prodigal. So he hired himself out for one of the local citizens who sent him to his farm to tend to the swine, and he longed to eat his fill of the pods in which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat, but there am I, dying of hunger. I shall get up and go to my father. I shall say to him, Father, I have sinned against you and heaven, and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would one of your hired workers." So he got up, went back to his father. While he was on a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. 2 parts of that show his father as an example of liberalness. He both treats his workers well. So the father has gains, he has wealth of some kind, and it hasn't been ill-gotten since he's running a farm and he's treating his workers well. So there's the first part, being having liberality is honest earnings. The other part is to be generous, to be giving in the proper way. Here he is running to his son. This is also perhaps a better sign of charity than liberality, because liberality is giving just to the best ordering of things. This one is out of the love of his son. I think you already see, though, that he's both charitable and liberal. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against you, against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son." Father ordered his servants quickly to bring the finest robes and put it on him, and a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, to take the fattened calf and slaughter it. Again, perhaps more charity, but also a little bit of a sign of liberality. Uh, Let us then celebrate the feast which, because the son of mine was dead and has come back to life again, he was lost and has been found. Then the celebration. Now, the older son uh, had been out in the field, and on his way back, as he neared the house, he heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked him what this might mean. The servant said to him, "Your brother has returned, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." He became angry, and when he refused to enter the house, his father came out to plead with him. He said to his father in reply, "Look, all these years I served you, and not once did I disobey your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends." Older brother here is clearly a sign of covetousness. So we have questions 117, 118, and 119 in one story. Worried about what is in it for him, and don't be wasteful and to hold on to it. But when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughtered the fattened calf. He said to him, "My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found." So this again is properly perhaps the golden mean that the father is showing is saying, yes, I understand, but you have to balance it out. It's all a matter of perspective. What is more important, your son or this cow? What is the proper ordering of things? The father has this particular ordering. So this parable is about God the Father, and about God's joy on people coming back from being prodigal. So if we were to take this to our own Christian lives, God is very happy when people stop being prodigal and come to liberality. He also goes out to those who deal with covetousness and also invites them back into the house. Uh, what is the aim? Again, liberality, not covetousness or prodigal. Just did this analysis. The golden mean is the perfect choice. So I made this little graph to help point it out. So if one has a strong love of money and doesn't give it away at all, doesn't share it, doesn't put it to the best use, it's covetousness. If one has a detachment from money and gives it away, one is prodigal. The proper balancing is liberality. Liberality is the proper balancing of giving and retaining, the love of money and detachment from money. If you are truly detached from money, you might not use it well, but somebody who has liberality knows how to properly balance these things out. And as you can see later, prudence, it makes sense because if we give too quickly, when bad times come, there's nothing to sustain us. Um, the prodigal gives incorrectly. Giving is good. Giving is one of the key features of liberality, but if you give incorrectly, it is not good. It's an excess. His giving is neither good for nor for a good end, uh, nor according as it is, no, as it ought to be. For sometimes they give much to those who ought to be poor, namely to buffoons and flatterers, whereas the good they give nothing. That's a line from Aristotle. The problem isn't that they give, it's just they don't give it correctly. Um, Story from one of my friends, Larry King, back when I was studying in Berkeley, he pointed out he worked for Microsoft at one point in the Seattle area, and he used to walk by a person who begged on the street every day, and he was making very good money and lived very simply, working for Microsoft. And he decided during Lent he would give $20 to somebody who was begging on the street. And when he came home from work that day, the person was surrounded by medics who were trying to get him into an ambulance because he had bought an entire bottle of alcohol, drank it all in that period of time, and had fallen down and hit his head, and now the ambulance was taking him over to help him. Um, Larry's response, being a very good Thomist, a very logical person, is saying, "I don't think I'm responsible for what had happened to that person. They did that to themselves. All I did was give them the $20. But if my intention was to help the person, I did not." I think that is a good lesson from it. If you give money to somebody who is an addict, you are not ultimately helping them, which is would be the goal of liberality, would be to spend money for its best possible use, so it has the best effect in the world, that it does the most good that it can do. If you give $20 to an alcoholic, um, that's probably not going to be for the greatest good. Or to a flatterer. There's plenty of people who will stand around and will tell you exactly what you want to hear with their money, with their hands out, getting you to buy them things. These are the people who you will attract if you are handing out money freely. A good liberality would be making sure the money goes to where it should be going. Give it to St. Vincent de Paul Society, give it to Peter's Pets, give it to some good charities that are doing some good work. You know, the food pantry at your home parish, probably 100% of the proceeds go right into providing food for needy families. That's probably better than just giving money off to somebody on the street corner or to somebody who's flattering you. Prodigalness, uh, prodigality, has a sense of excess. Has excess, consists chiefly not in total amount given, but into the amount that ought to be given. So it's not that a prodigal person gives too much money necessarily. It's not that the volume of money is too much. It's just in proportion to what ought to be given, it is too much. He points out that a liberal person, may give even more money than a prodigal person, but they're doing it to the right charities, to the right way. So if you've given money to buy mosquito nets to help protect children from getting certain diseases that are easily avoidable with just 50-cent mosquito nets, you can go a long way with that. If you just decide you're going to drive down the street and throw $100 bills out the window, you might give a lot more, but it might have a much smaller effect on actually doing the good that you intend to do. So again, it's part of covetousness, and both prodigal excess deals with not necessarily the amount. A poor person could be have covetedness. A poor person could be prodigal. Somebody could have only a few dollars to their name, and they give it away unwisely. Um, it's not the volume, it's what you intend to do and how you do it. Uh, it does point out that there is room still for giving everything away, but this is in terms of uh, spiritual perfection. So when St. Francis stripped all of his clothes off before the bishop and gave himself over to the service of the church and to God, that wasn't he wasn't being prodigal. That was part of spiritual perfection. Uh, to leave behind all of the responsibilities and worries of money, to focus entirely on spiritual things, is perfectly acceptable and within the tradition of the church. Um, he called it perfect liberality. It's perfectly liberal to do that. If the story of the prodigal son was he took his father's inheritance and he went out and he spent the rest of his life taking care of lepers and the poor, he wouldn't have been coming back the way he did. This would have been the story of the saintly son who did wonderful things because he spent it on prostitutes and spending money uh, freely and running out. Uh, then it's a sign of prodigal. Uh, Many wonderful saintly queens of Europe had, after their husbands died, turned their castles into hospitals and places to care for the sick and the elderly. Um, Elizabeth of Hungary, for example. Uh, some would say that being prodigal is less grievous than covetousness. To be prodigal is more close to liberality than covetousness, because at the heart of liberality is proper giving. It's about giving. It's about being generous, and prodigal is more closely aligned with being generous. They're too generous. That's the problem. They're too giving. That's the problem. But they're kind of more in line than covetousness, which is not giving at all. That's an extreme deficiency um, in liberality versus prodigal, which might just be off a bit, gray area. The prodigal person is useful to many, whereas the coveted person is useful to none, not even to himself. Interesting points. So the prodigal person might give money to the food pantry, give money to the poor, give money to this person on the street, give money to their friends, give money to just give it all away. If you throw enough seed on the ground, eventually something will sprout, right? So if you're prodigal enough, eventually, if you're prodigal and you're rich enough, eventually some of it will go to good use, whether you did your research or not. Versus a covetous person who doesn't help anyone, and in some ways they don't even enjoy it themselves. Kind of like story of Scrooge. Here he is with all this wealth, but
And we're
he's still
committed to work
wearing,
together to help prevent future biological
he's
threats
still
by
living in poor
strengthening the World
conditions
Health
himself, not enjoying
Organization,
good food,
supporting
living
our
coldly,
bold targets under the
doesn't really
global
get
health
to enjoy
security
his own life.
agenda,
What good is it
cooperating
to
in a
him?
global
It's not good to
partnership
anyone, it's
against
not
the
even good to
spread
him.
of weapons of mass destruction,
Prodigality
and
is cured with
engaging another
experience and
multilateral
age, according
institutions
to St. Thomas.
to promote
I'm not
transparency,
entirely
build
sure
capacity,
this
and
is true
strengthen
in the
global
present day.
norms.
But his point
We
is,
also
and
agreed
I
to
think
work in
maybe
close
not
cooperation
entirely wrong,
to strengthen the
if you
supply
were
chain security
really
and
prodigal
resilience,
at 20
and to
years old,
ensure that Canada
spend and
and the
spend and
United
spend,
States are
you max
driving
out
a
your credit
robust
cards,
economic recovery
got
that
nothing
benefits
left.
everyone,
Okay,
not
then you
just
go
those at the
bankrupt by
top.
26.
That's especially important
Probably
because we know that
27.
this
Hopefully
pandemic
you're moving in the
is
right
not
direction and
affecting
not
everyone the same
repeating that.
way.
If you
Women are
do
dropping
it
out of
all over
work,
again,
the
okay, by
workforce at
32 you hit
alarming
bankruptcy
rates.
again. Okay.
Black,
Um,
Latino, and Native, but
Hopefully at some
also and
point
other
you learn.
minorities are particularly
His
hard
point is
hit. We
eventually
also agreed to work together
you
on
won't make it to old age if you
inclusive
keep
recovery
going bankrupt.
using the tools
You
available
must be
through the
doing,
small
you
and
have to
medium
learn at some
enterprise
point how to
chapter
properly
of our trade
spend.
agreement to support
Unlike a
women
covetous
and
person,
minority-owned businesses.
if you
We
covet
also
at
doubled down
20
on our efforts
and
to tackle
save and
climate
hold on
change.
to
It was
everything and
really,
you're
really
not generous and
encouraging.
you don't give,
Now that the United
um,
States is back in the
do
Paris
that through your
Agreement,
entire life.
we intend to
You'll probably
demonstrate our
die very
leadership
rich.
in order to spur other countries
If
to raise their
your
own
waking
ambitions.
desire, if your main
Canada
focus in life is
and the
to
United
acquire,
States are
if
going to
that
work
really
in
pushes you and you
lockstep
have any
to
skill
display
whatsoever,
the
then you
seriousness of
can
our
push and push and
commitment
push and you can
at
acquire,
both
acquire,
home and
acquire.
abroad.
And by the end of your
To
life, you
that
probably
end,
have a lot.
we're launching
You
a high-level
might
climate
never get
ambition
redirected. You might never have that
ambition ministerial,
Scrooge moment
and to align our
having three
policies and our
ghosts meet
goals,
you in the middle
and
of
to
the night
achieve
before you die.
net zero emissions
Versus
by
being
2050.
prodigal,
Prime Minister
you'll
Thibault
crash and
and
burn a
I
number
share
of
an
times if you don't
unwavering
change
faith
that.
in the capacity of our peoples to
What
meet
is
the challenges
worse,
of this
being
new age
prodigal
if we
or
lead with
having
our core
covetousness?
strengths, our
St.
democratic
Thomas
values,
warns,
our diverse and
particularly to the
dynamic
church, and
peoples.
he doesn't always point
We
directly
both
to the church,
recognize
but he
our
points to the church
responsibility
saying,
as leading
clergy have to be
democracies
very
to
careful
defend
about
our
being
shared values around the
prodigal,
world and to
because
strengthen
if
our
they
own
spend very
democracies
freely
at
the
home.
church's money,
That
that
means
money
rooting
is
out
money which
systemic
should
racism
go to the
and
poor.
unconscious bias from our
So
institutions
in
and our
that way, you
laws,
end up
as
violating
well as our
justice.
hearts.
If
Today,
clergy spends all
we
this
agreed
money
to
on
reestablish
fine
the
clothing and good
Cross-Border Crime
meals and
Forum
expensive
and work
vacations,
together to modernize our approach to
you could
community
normally say,
safety.
well, it's better to be
And we'll
prodigal
do
than
all
covetous.
the most we can, do
Well,
more
when you're the
to
church,
take on racism and
if you're too
discrimination
prodigal,
in
maybe
both
that's
our
not so
systems.
good, unless you're spending it
Canada
on the poor.
and the United
If you're
States
spending it
are
on
not
the
only
clergy
vital
themselves, then
partners,
that could be
we're NATO
very
allies
wrong.
committed to shared defense. Prime
It says the
Minister and I
prodigal
discussed
person
our
sins
work
against
with our
himself by
European
spending
allies to
money
bolster
that is
transatlantic
his,
security, which includes
and the
meeting
means
our
to support
Wales
himself. So
commitments.
a prodigal
We
person hurts
also
themselves
agreed
by going
to
bankrupt.
modernize the
Prodigal
North
person hurts
American
themselves by
Aerospace
spending
Defense
everything
Command,
they
NORAD,
need to survive
which is
off
still
of.
the
Now they have
only
nothing.
binational military
They
command
also
of its
sin
kind.
against others when they're
And we will
giving this money
launch
to
an
buffoons and
expanded
flatterers rather
U.S.-Canadian
than to
Arctic
actual
dialogue
people who need the
to
help.
cover issues related to continental
Person.
security,
So
economic
you're
and
hurting
social
yourself and you're
development,
hurting other
and
people by
Arctic
being
governance. And
prodigal.
finally,
He also points out
coming
that
on
a
the heels
covetous
of the
person hurts
G7 meeting
themselves
last
and hurts
Friday,
others
it was
as
an
well.
opportunity for
Covetous
Prime
person
Minister
doesn't even
Trudeau and
enjoy
I
the wealth that
to
they
explore
have,
our
so
bilateral
they're hurting
partnership
themselves.
to
And
reinforce and help drive issues of
they're not
concern
helping
in
anybody
our
else with it,
hemisphere
so
and globally.
nobody's benefiting from it.
That
So in
includes
his
coordinating
view,
our
both
approaches
being too
to better compete with China
prodigal and
and the counter
covetous
threats to our interests and values.
both hurts
Let me
themselves and their
reiterate
neighbors.
our support for the
So
release
the
of
correct
the
approach
detained
is
Chinese,
morality, the
detained
proper
in China, two
balancing
Canadians,
spending
Michael
and
Spavor
saving, the proper
and
balance
Michael
of giving
Covering, excuse me.
and
Human
retaining.
beings are not
This is
bartering chips.
this is
You know,
the
we're going to work
correct
together until we
relationship
get
to
their
money.
safe return.
Not becoming obsessed
Canada
with
and the
it,
United
not
States will
becoming
stand
so
together
detached
against
that it
abuse
doesn't
of
mean
universal
anything.
rights and democratic freedoms. We're going to
One
strengthen
exception to that
our
would be
shared
if you're
commitment to
aiming
providing
for
safe
spiritual
haven
perfection
for refugees
as
and
a
asylum seekers,
monk or
and
something
so
like
much
that.
more. The United States is no
Enter into
closer
solitude
and
and
no
live in a
more
cave
important
and
friend
you
than Canada.
focus on a
Our
life of
nations
prayer
share a
and
close geography
then
and
perhaps
history
it will work.
that will
So in
forever bind us
conclusion, to
together,
look at just the three
but our
articles,
values are even more consequential.
the prodigal and
But it's a shared
covetousness
spirit of our people
are both
that's going to
excesses and
ensure ours is
deficiencies
a
in their own.
future of
Again,
hope and
prodigal
opportunity.
person is
Canadians and Americans
efficient in
are
using money
innovative,
correctly
creative,
and has an
entrepreneurial,
excess of
competitive,
spending.
open-hearted, and rights-respecting.
Covetedness person
There's
has a
nothing we
deficiency in
cannot
spending,
achieve
but
when we
has
commit ourselves to it.
an
And
abundance
when we work
in
together, as the closest of
collecting
friends should,
and
we only
retaining.
make each other stronger. So thank you again,
Prodigality
Mr. Prime
rewards
Minister, for your
buffoons
friendship
and flatterers.
and for your leadership.
The
I look forward
great
to
that
when
the
we're
person
able to
is
meet
giving,
in
but they're
person.
giving in the wrong way.
And
And
all that
prodigality is
Canada
more
and the
like
United States are going to accomplish together.
liberality,
So
but
God
still
bless you,
lacks the
and
golden
thanks
mean.
for today.
Better to be more giving than more
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you, tout le
coveted,
monde. Merci
but
tout le monde. Let me
that's
begin
still
by
the
saying that
golden
all
mean
of
is the
us are
perfect.
thinking of our friends in Texas
And
right now.
lastly, just
I know
before
Sask
concluding
Power
on
has
this
been
in this
sending
last section, I
electricity
pointed
down
it
and
out
told
under the
President
topic of
Canada
liberality.
is here to
When we're
help
talking about
however
liberality,
we
we're
can.
not talking about
Mr. President,
liberal
it's been great
versus
to sit down with
conservative
you
in a
this afternoon.
political
This is, of
American
course,
or
not the first
European
time we've
sense
worked
term.
together.
It's not.
Back in
We're
2016,
not
I had
talking
the
about
pleasure of hosting you here
Bernie
in Ottawa
Sanders
as
or
Vice
Hillary
President.
Clinton. We're talking about
Over dinner,
liberality.
I remember talking about
we're
how
talking
the
about
extraordinary
morality
friendship
in terms
between Canada and
of
the United
giving
States is not just
material
weather-changing
possessions.
seasons.
Although
It
I
has
will
grown
point
to go
out
deeper
that there
and
is
stronger. Well,
there
today,
is some
we're
connection.
taking our next step forward. The
Clearly,
President
this
and I
was all
discussed the
before
ambitious
modern
new partnership
political
roadmap
age,
based on
but
shared
this
values
idea
and
that
priorities that will guide our country's work together
that
over the coming years.
somebody who
In the
claims to
face
be a
of
liberal,
COVID-19,
what are
of
some
climate
things that they
change,
are aiming
of
for? They are
rising
aiming to
inequality,
provide
this
healthcare for
is
everyone,
our moment to act.
not just because of
So we're
justice,
not
but even
wasting
people
any
who are
time
sick who
in
never
getting
paid
down
into
to
the
work.
system. We want to give them
Job
healthcare.
one
That
remains
kind of is like
keeping
liberality,
people safe and ending
not
this
for
pandemic.
justice, but because
This
that is the
afternoon,
proper
the
ordering.
President and
That
I
would be
discussed
that creates a
collaboration
better
to beat
society, a good
COVID-19,
society.
from keeping key supplies
Provides
moving and
we can
supporting
if we have
science and research
enough. We
to joint
should
efforts
take care
through
of the sick.
international institutions. We're
Should we
standing
welcome
united
the
in this
stranger
fight.
into our land?
En plus de
Well,
nos efforts communs pour combattre la
you couldn't
COVID-19,
say it's too
on a
prodigal
aussi
to do that,
discuté
right? It's
de
true
nos
giving.
mesures
It's
strictes
too
concernant les
extravagant
voyages
to give
pour protéger les gens des deux côtés de
to
la frontière.
immigrants or migrants
Présentement,
this.
même si notre
But
plus
then
grande priorité
it might just
est
be
d'assurer
the
la
right amount would
sécurité
be
des gens,
liberal.
il faut aussi qu'on
Liberality.
pense à notre avenir.
So you might be hinging between
Comme vous l'avez dit,
liberality
Monsieur le Président, on doit rebâtir en même.
and
La dernière
prodigalism.
année a
So
révélé toutes sortes
if we look
d'inégalités
at
dans
it
nos
from a
sociétés.
political perspective,
Plus
we
que
would
jamais,
want to
il est temps
not
d'agir.
be prodigal.
Le
Right?
moment
We
est
don't
venu
want
de
to be
rebâtir
prodigal.
des économies plus fortes
We want to
pour tout le monde
have
pour
true
en profiter.
liberality which is that
I know
middle
the
ground,
president and I
that
are
golden
on the
mean.
same page when it comes
But
to
I think
standing up for the middle
a little
class
bit of a
and
challenge
people
to
working
people
hard
who
to join.
call themselves
And with
conservative
millions
would
of
be
families relying on
making
the
sure that
Canada-US
they
partnership,
are
this is
conservative
work we must do together.
in a way that is
Just
liberal,
take
has
the energy
liberality,
industry.
and not in a way
Canadian
that has
energy workers
covetousness.
power homes on both
You
sides
don't
of the
want
border.
to have
It goes to
coveting.
show that
You
we're
don't want to
all
say, well, we
better
don't
off
give
for this
anything to
partnership.
anyone unless they have earned
Today,
it,
the president
unless
and
they
I
deserve it,
discussed
unless justice
leveraging
demands
supply
it, unless
chains,
there is a
support for
civic debt
businesses,
owed to them
create
for that.
good, well-paying
St. Thomas
jobs,
is
and
pointing
help
out that
people
if
who've
we
been
were to
hardest hit
err in any
get
way,
back on their feet.
right, again, the goal
Ici au
is
Canada,
liberality,
l'innovation
balance.
et
But if
l'énergie
we were to
propre
err in any way, it
occuperont
would be
une
a little
place
bit better to err on
cruciale
the side of
dans
being
notre plan
prodigal
pour rebâtir notre économie.
than coveting.
Le président et moi avons
So
discuté
just
de
a little
l'importance d'une
challenge to anyone
croissance
out there
propre
politically.
afin de créer de nouvelles opportunités pour les Canadiens et les
And
Américains,
the next
mais aussi
topic
pour protéger
is a
l'environnement
nice
et
short
lutter
one
contre les changements climatiques.
as well. So we'll
Il
move
faut continuer
along
de poser des
quickly
gestes
from
significatifs pour